Hi, Emily.
Hi, how are you?
We are so happy to be here with you. We are doing great. We're having a blast talking about a lot of kind of interesting topics in music that is going on right now that I'm sure you might have some perspective on. First,
hmm
everybody's throwing crap at artists at concerts. I don't know. We don't know why this is happening. Like Harry Styles got hit, Pink got hit with her mother's ashes. Is this something that any of your clients are concerned with right now? Like, why do you think this is happening so much lately?
I think actually quite a lot of people are because it seems to be becoming a little bit of a trend, slightly worryingly. Luckily, it's not anything that's happened to any of my clients, but they definitely, I think everyone has a story about something wild that's happened to them on stage, whether it's been someone grabbing them or saying certain things to them. I know there was, Ice Spice isn't a client of mine, but I recently saw a viral video of someone making a lot of inappropriate comments to her as she was up on stage. I think that happens quite a lot too. So yeah, luckily we haven't come across that yet, but I'm sure we will at some point in the future.
Well, I want to talk to you to start things off about how you got started in the industry because your origin story, getting into the biz, is kind of an interesting one. It's not what I've heard before. That you basically got your first big gig in the music industry because of martial arts. Can you tell us about this?
Yes. So, well, I'd always wanted to be in music ever since I was a child. Before I could talk, I think I was singing, and I was kind of like frantically applying for positions. And you're no more than just a face on a screen to most of these people. And I didn't have any family in the business, and at the same time, I was also doing teaching kickboxing and boxing. And I was teaching in the gym right next door to Sony Music Publishing, which I had no idea about because I knew a lot about music growing up and I went to a music school, but we were taught how to put on a show, but not necessarily what a publisher does, what a music producer does, or anything like that. So I was in the gym one day. It was kind of like they had a professional kind of boxing ring, and there was sparring there. And Guy Moot, who is now CEO of Warner Chappell Music Publishing, was running Sony Music Publishing at the time. And I'd said to someone in the gym, gosh, I'm having a really hard time. I'm desperately applying for these internships and just don't seem to get anything back. How can I get my foot in the door? And he said, hang on a minute. He said, I think one of the guys who trains here is one of the guys who runs Sony Music Publishing. Do you want me to put you in contact? So obviously I was like, yes, yes, absolutely. So it also turned out, yeah, that Guy is, yeah, basically a black belt and very, very into martial arts. So not only did we bond over that, but that was actually what got my foot in the door, because that was, I guess, what made me more than just a name on a screen with a CV like everyone else. So yeah, so we kind of mutually bonded over that, and that's what got me in.
I've always heard stories about people finding jobs not because of what college they went to or what's on their resume, but because they have some hobby or some interest that messes with the person that is potentially offering them an opportunity. I've heard it in the martial arts space, or maybe you're both into pickleball or video games or something like that. And so I think that's the argument for, as a creative professional or any kind of professional, to have interests outside of the industry that you're trying to get into, because you never know when one of those hobbies, whenever one of those extracurricular activities might mesh with somebody who could be giving you an opportunity, and you could kickbox your way into the music business, which I just love the idea of this. Gideon is a, I mean, is this something that you've ever come across either in the music or in the business side,
I
like
mean, to be,
having some kind of outside interest that
yeah,
helped create an opportunity for you?
yeah. I mean, well, it's not only create an opportunity for me. Music, of course, being a jazz guitar player was what got me an interview. I was clearly unqualified to do what I got an interview to do, but because I said I played jazz guitar, the guy was a jazz head, and so he invited me in. We talked about jazz. Also, when I hire people, I mean, to be honest. I really hire people based upon their hobbies and what they're good at, much more than where they went to school and what their GPA is. So the finding common ground and people's personal habits. Like for example, if you do martial arts, there's a certain level of discipline associated with that. Like it's just a fact that you have chosen to do something that is imbued with a level of discipline. It means there's something about you that's going to get shit done. And so, that alone, personal habits, very important.
Totally. And I think also it's, when you connect with whether it's an artist, a producer in a studio setting, I mean, often you're thrown into these kind of really intimate situations with people in a very short space of time. And I think, as I'm sure I mean, going into a session with someone, joining a session with someone that you've never met before, it's kind of like going on a blind date naked. I mean, you're very exposed. Everyone's kind of got all this like raw feeling and raw emotion out there. And I think anything that you have that you can kind of bond with someone over that kind of provides you with like a mutual understanding of one another, why you got into it, how you got into it, anything like that is super important.
Emily, you've spoken a lot on the subject of artist compensation. You're definitely what we would call an artist rights advocate, which means you have a place in our hearts here at Break the Business. And you've talked a lot about, the disparities that seem to exist in compensation for creative professionals and the need for perhaps policies that can address that. Can you give us some examples of where you're seeing that compensation disparity most starkly? We've talked in the past and a few weeks ago about how songwriters, for example, might not be seeing the compensation that they could potentially get in a different policy landscape. But where are you seeing this disparity most prevalent?
I mean, I think, it's always easy to point, immediately to the streaming giants, and don't get me wrong, they're not the heroes here by any means. But I mean, I think the biggest issue is with the labels. I mean, I think right now it's also the way that the money is spread out, right? I mean, I literally, right before we got on, have been, dealing with, a deal where, they're refusing to give the writer who contributed a huge amount to the record any fee or any point, particularly for songwriters, because with producers, at the very least, you are getting a couple of master points. You're usually getting a fee, you're getting something up front. As a songwriter, I mean, streaming is bringing in nothing, and, streaming giants make a huge amount of money. Anytime a song goes into dispute, for example, and there's a split discrepancy, no one gets paid out. If the artist doesn't sign, and every single artist doesn't sign a letter of direction, no one gets paid out. I mean, there's a lot of ways that or tricks rather, that labels have to make it really, really difficult to get paid. And I think there's also just such a discrepancy in where the money is spread out. For example, I know there's a major label who just spent $300,000 on a song that's done absolutely nothing because it went viral on TikTok. But yet they absolutely could never in a million years justify giving $1,000 to a struggling songwriter who can't pay their rent. There's been other situations I remember having with an artist on a major label, where we couldn't get any fee for the writers approved, but they then spent over $1 million on the music video. So there's a huge imbalance somewhere, and it's not that they can't, it's that they don't want to. Because they've actually never been making more money than they are right now, and it benefits them hugely to kind of basically just say no, because they have the power to do so. And a lot of the times, writers and artists and producers, or not so much artists rather, because the artists are obviously getting a bigger piece of the pie and they're seeing money elsewhere. They're seeing money in branding and merch and ticket sales. Writers and producers aren't seeing any of that, so really any fee is something, and it's a standard that I think a lot of managers are trying to set. But my God, the pushback is real. I mean, I don't think I've ever, asked for a fee for a writer, or even 1 point for a writer, that's ever not had pushback.
Wow.
So it's hard for sure.
It's the history. It's like bad deals make bad history, and those early days when Spotify agreed, and of course they couldn't project in the future. I'm not even disparaging Spotify, but when they agreed to give that big a piece to the labels for non-independent artists, was the day that the entire wasn't a day, it was a series of deals over time, but was the day that the entire artist economy was subverted, perverted, whatever the right word is. And we are, Emily, I'm an investor, and my partners and I own something called AudioMac, which is one of the biggest hip hop streaming.
Yes,
So you know AudioMac, right? So that's it's we're mostly independent, or largely independent artists, but we also have content that we pay for. And this has given me a glimpse into how those deals and the amount of the money that the labels are still getting from the big pipes like Spotify, Deezer, you name the DSP. This is what's the expression? The elephant in the room? Right. This is the elephant in the room economically, and it is choking off oxygen to artists and actually a whole community and ecosystem. But I don't want to hijack answers to your questions. I'm just adding this on as a corollary to what you guys are doing, because in building AudioMac, it is once a week that I get on the phone with the CEO and we bang our heads against the wall about this problem, and we have not figured it out, and we have not conquered it.
I just don't see an industry from where I'm sitting as an entertainment lawyer. For the lion's share of musicians, I don't see an industry where there's enough money to be made for the streaming service, a label, and the recording artist and the songwriters to all make a decent living on the vast majority of music that gets produced, especially when you look at the way that a lot of record deals are structured. Emily, as you were kind of talking about your experiences with getting artists paid, I was just having flashbacks to some of my more nightmarish record label negotiations, where you'll get a record deal that says that the artist is going to get like a 15% royalty or a 17% royalty, which is the same kind of similar percentage to what they would have gotten like 30 years ago when music was sold as CDs. Except, why is the artist only getting the same 17% royalty? There's no manufacturing cost to the label. There's a lot more money being made. You don't need to only give the artist 15%. It could be something more like 50-50. But labels will do that just because they have the market power. And so when you think about what 15% means to an artist, Spotify is paying something like 6/10 of a cent per stream, or 5/10 of a cent per stream.
Yeah, I wish.
Then you have to say 15% of 5/10 of a cent per stream. How many streams does an artist get to need to repay, say, a $50,000 advance or $50,000 in recording costs? And the answer is they will never recoup that, because you're talking about fractions of a cent, because the record label is coming in and taking your fun-sized Spotify royalty and making it microscopic. And like, if the label is involved, there's just not enough money for everybody to make.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think it's the way it's shared it's still really outdated. I mean, I think that tech is kind of like somewhere over here, and then music is like over here, just struggling to catch up, but it's also very convenient for the labels to not be up to date on, all the latest technology. I mean, for example, there's, I think obviously a big movement now, to move to independent streaming companies. I mean, you have companies like STEM, for example, who, they did Brent Faiyaz's album that did amazingly last year. They did Giveon. They have Frank Ocean. I think that is definitely a move. And, for an artist that I work on, we've had a number of major label interests, and yet we've decided to still stick to the independent route, because we know that going into a major label, we're going to get a far better deal and be able to go in and get that 50-50 split, get that, that power and that creative control as well only once she's been developed, because labels aren't really doing artist development in the same way anymore. I think artist development now falls on a manager, and you have to wait until you have the social media following, the TikTok following, you know what I mean? I mean, all of those things. You basically have to take yourself viral before anyone else on a label will commit to giving you a fair deal.
Gosh, that is one of my least favorite developments that we've seen in the modern music industry. Just the destruction of what we used to call in the old days A&R, right? The A&R department. The idea that like or artist development, or like that labels would actually send people into clubs looking for the next big artist, and then would sign that artist to a demo deal and actually work with that artist and build them up into something. Like, that's done, right? You don't even, and you know this like from your work, Emily, like your client isn't even going to get signed to the label unless they're a turnkey property, unless they already have the social media following, unless they already have the music done, and then the label's just going to come and like use your finished product. And then once you get signed to the label's not going to push on a record until it goes viral on TikTok. They're going to tell that artist, oh, go make your song viral on TikTok, and then we'll put it out there. Then we'll push it. And, we all know from the way that the TikTok algorithm works is that none of us know how the TikTok algorithm works. And we don't, going viral is a crapshoot. And so I see one of these once a week, I feel like, of an artist who will just say on TikTok, please make my song go viral, fans, or my label's never going to release this record. Like, that's what we're giving a label 87 cents on the dollar for, to have the artist and the manager do all the work.
Yep, 100%, and it also it doesn't actually, the TikTok thing. It's what's confusing to me is that it doesn't actually really translate to anything in terms of what the song does and how much money the song makes. You know what I mean? I mean, yes, it can go viral on TikTok. That doesn't mean anything for the writers and producers. But, I mean, they're not getting paid for any of that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish. I actually have a question for you, but please finish. Notice how polite I'm being.
Yeah, no,
given Emily's martial arts background, notice how polite I'm being.
Smart, yeah.
Like, I'm downright obsequious at this point.
Yeah, self-preservation. I can admire that.
I don't want to be hurt.
No, it definitely. I'd say that the way it comes in handy most is remaining calm, because I think you're often put in positions where it's kind of it's almost like a thug-like mafia mentality of, all right, we're going to bully you and use all our power until you kind of like give in, and I think it's remaining calm in those situations. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. And I think, for an artist, it's also, like you said, who dictates the algorithm? A bunch of 12-year-olds. Those are the taste makers of today, and I think that it's a real shame.
Yeah, see, 30 years ago, terrestrial radio decided who was a hit. Now it's Charli D'Amelio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we've all held her album. Oh no, Dixie had the album actually.
Dixie had, of course. You got to know your D'Amelios. Come on, Gideon, you had a question.
So, I mean, I have a couple lines of questions. I guess I'll fire them off really quickly. Sync. I said to Ryan previously, I said, a good friend of mine who's a world famous producer, actually his name's David Kahn, and he produced, Paul McCartney and James Brown and the Bengals and MTV Unplugged. And he's just a really smart, insightful, thoughtful guy. He'd be a wonderful guy to have on this show, come to think of it. And he said to me, sync is the new radio. And I wonder, as a manager with ever expanding duties, because, music managers now, it's social media. They have to manage all kinds of stuff that they didn't have to manage exactly 10 years ago. I wonder, a lot of my friends say, well, sync is just a mafia. There's a few music supervisors that really matter if you want to make any money and so on. And obviously I run a band and I have some sync experience myself. To what extent do you view it as your job as a manager of artists, if that's the right word to describe what you do, to get them sync? And to what extent do you agree with this idea that sync is the new radio? And just, as someone doing your job, how does sync figure into, what you're thinking about when you wake up in the morning?
It's hugely important. I mean, I think it's still different than radio. I think, depending on the sync, it has more power than radio. It's also something that is an amazing income source if you're not published. I mean, if you're not published, you're getting all those fees directly, of course. So, for my independent artist, sync is huge. We work with, I've worked with a couple of outside sync companies, and, they can really bring in great money and great opportunities because, way more people are hearing your music, I mean, but it depends on how big that sync is. I mean, obviously the goal is you want to get a Super Bowl commercial, you want to get a McDonald's sync, you want to get, I mean, I've got a song, but burger related song coming out next month for one of my artists. So I sent it to the sync company. I said, right, let's get this to McDonald's, but let's get it to Burger King. She's not published, so all of those fees she's getting directly. I mean, it's huge. It can obviously get your music out there to different audiences that may not have heard your music before. I mean, I think each artist, where I have one artist from Minnesota, so she has a really big following in Minnesota and in her hometown, but a sync is gonna get someone, maybe in Norway to hear the song, so it's definitely really, really important. I think it becomes, when you sign a publishing deal, you obviously relinquish those rights and those fees. It's helping you recoup your deal for sure. So it is helpful. But, once you sign a publishing deal, most of the time the publisher is seeing the majority of that money. There is one publisher that doesn't. Disney Music Publishing is the only, unless there's another one that I'm not aware of, but Disney Music Publishing is a company that I have a client signed to and I'm a big fan of, for the reason that, they allow work for hire, so you get all your sync fees. Which is, pretty unique and special. And for the writers that, I mean, am I pushing for them all to get points and fees on every release? Absolutely. Do we get points and fees on every release? Absolutely not. So, every little helps. They've got families, you know what I mean? And yes, your publishing advance is, is something, but what a lot of people forget is that publishing advance, no matter how high you get it, that's got to last you an entire year. It's got to pay your rent. It's got to pay your studio rent, your studio equipment, your day-to-day, I mean, and these things aren't cheap, and I think that a lot of the time there's pressure put on people or on artists and writers and producers, I'll just do it for the opportunity because it'll open more doors. And yes, in some cases that works, but at the same time you shouldn't have to work for free in order for that to be the case, to get an opportunity.
Our guest is Emily Cameron. She is a music manager and partner at ATC Management. Find out more about our guest's work by following them on Instagram and Twitter at ATC Management. Emily, this has been a blast. I feel like we have found a kindred spirit in you as an artist advocate and as somebody who shares our healthy skepticism of the record label model. That's you'll always have a fandom here at Break the Business. Before we let you go, Emily, we got one last question for you. Do you have any last tips for the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
I would say, any last tips? I think keep pushing, never give up. I think that, it takes a really, really long time. As they say, every overnight success is 10 years in the making. So, no matter how much you see or people tell you, oh, it's your TikTok and oh, you've got to do this. never compromise your integrity. If it doesn't feel right, or if it feels too good to be true, it probably is. Don't go for quick cash grabs, because it can hurt your career later down the line. I mean, I think that, we're in a difficult climate for independent artists, but, bigger picture is always really important. I promise, if you say no to something that doesn't seem right, something much better will come along 2 weeks later. I've just had this happen with an artist. We got offered something that seemed too good to be true, but it was something that really would have affected her long-term career and kind of slightly derailed the plan we had for her artist project. So we turned it down, as hard as it was, for the money. And 2 weeks later, something amazing came along. So, I would say the most important thing is keep going and fight. Don't let labels or anyone, anyone in a publisher or a label belittle you. I think your art is important, and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Our thanks to Emily Cameron. Our thanks to our very youthful-looking co-host, Gideon King. Find out more about his band by visiting GideonKingCityBlog.com. Thanks to producer Lauren. And, of course, our hearty thanks to all of our viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for checking out Break the Business. We'll see you next week.